Hello and welcome to the special author interview for FanFiAddict. I'm Frasier Armitage, part-time robot, full-time nerd, author of New Yesterday, Time's Ellipse, and A Stitch Between Worlds. And joining me today is somebody who you'll recognize, somebody who's been on the channel before. This is an absolutely awesome indie fantasy writer whose audiobook has recently been finalized. We were talking about it last time, and he's back to tell us all about how the process has been. It is the legend that is Tim Hardie. Tim, how's it going?
Thanks, Fraser. That's a ridiculous introduction. Just to be clear, I wouldn't say I'm a legend. I'm more somebody people might have noticed lurking, but so it's somewhere in the middle of those two things, basically.
Pretty sure that's how like King Arthur started. He was just
yeah.
kind of lurking around, and then over time, it's the lurkers that become legends. Tim, I think this
Yeah,
is it.
I don't think I've got all the. I mean, King Arthur had centuries. I've probably been sort of visible for about 5 years. It's like I've still got all the way to go on that trajectory. But yeah, that's a lovely introduction. Thank you very much.
Oh, good.
Yeah, doing all right. So the very mood just sort of chatting before we press the record. Weren't we? Lots and lots going on. But that's always a good. I always think that's a good place to be. So yeah, I'm pretty good at the moment. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Now, I feel like that's the thing about when we're writers, because like a lot of history is written by the people who write, isn't it? And all of this
Mm.
kind of stuff. I feel like we're not doing enough to write our own legends as like writers. I feel like that should be in the front of every book, right? Like the legend of Tim Hardie. That would be you should start it. That would be
You're
great.
not letting go of this really random point, are you?
No, never.
I suppose why. I suppose what you're. I don't really think. I think it's an interesting thing about I kind of think of my writing as a legacy that kind of lives on beyond me. So to a certain extent, I suppose. I suppose I am writing a legend, but I never think it's a legend about me. If that makes any sense, it's more about a leaving behind a tale that's been told. So yeah, I suppose there is a strange, when you're a writer, I suppose a creator, any kind of artwork, really, there's something of you that endures in a way that doesn't happen in other walks of life in quite the same way. So yeah, food for thought. We've gone very
Gone
deep.
very deep, very quick. Yeah, I
Yeah,
love it. It's like, yeah. But part of your legacy is, of course, Hall of Bones, which was very successful as a print book, but has now been converted into an audiobook. The last time that you were on the channel, it was just before your Kickstarter, or it was during your Kickstarter, wasn't it, for
yeah,
getting the
that's right.
audiobook off the
Yeah.
ground? And now it's done. It's out in the world. Tell us about what that was like, that process of putting the audiobook together.
Yeah, it was exhausting. I think is so. I mean, when you were very kindly supporting me in sort of that sort of live phase of the actual campaign. So getting, I think I thought I knew how much work that would be, and it proved to be about 100 times more work than it actually than that in reality. And I think part is because you are just under that sort of low level stress all the time. It's fine if you're back on day one, but I did not back on day one. I backed on day 29 or 30. So it was a very much sort of up and down experience. So incredibly busy during the campaign. Lots and lots of updates and things to sort out. But then actually, because we were producing an audiobook, there were lots of fallow periods afterwards. So the campaign closed in April 2024, but actually fulfillment only finished in January 2025. That's the year we're in, isn't it? Yeah, January 2025, which in terms of getting the audiobook out to the supporters. But then, of course, what we've also done is creating an audiobook that's actually gone officially live as of the 14th of February. So I've just gone through the weekend official launch. So it's literally days now. We're recording on the 17th, just a few days out. It really feels like the project's finally finished, I suppose.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of taken up a year of my life one way and another, from the planning stages right through to fulfillment.
And how does it feel actually now that it's out there in the world? Are you allowing yourself to celebrate?
Yeah, I did. I definitely did celebrate. I think all writers can kind of relate to this. Whenever you finish a project, there's a mix of emotions. There's the higher the finish in getting there, but there's also there is that mental fatigue that comes with closing out a project. So I kind of had an inkling of what it would be like. I released A Roll of the Dice, which was a short story collection that was a sort of spin out bonus basically from the Kickstarter. So 4 stories. It was about 10,000 words in total. It's quite a tiny little book. We went through the recording and proofing process, myself and my narrator, RJ Bailey, and showed us the ropes of what to do, went through the distribution process, fairly straightforward. But when you're doing a 140,000 word novel, that level of proofing, I think I'd not quite anticipated quite how much proofing work would be needed. So we kind of, RJ did an awful lot of work sort of getting in the run up to Christmas, getting the files ready and getting them over to me. But yeah, it took me, good chunk of January to then kind of get through, it was a good 2 or 3 weeks of just solid proofing of that. And then, that word's not quite right, having to send the file back and get it back again. So there's lots and lots of to and fro, much more involved than, a roll of the dice was kind of like one hit, or it felt like that at the time. All of Bones kind of felt like, will RJ Bailey sort of block me on all forms of social media and email at some point? It kind of just annoy the hell out of him. And it actually he was absolutely fine. There wasn't loads and loads to do, but yeah, I was surprised at how much work there was just to keep going back through those audio files and keep just, tweaking it and making sure everything was absolutely right. Very busy. So yeah, definitely peaks, troughs, and just sort of now it can, some satisfaction, but definitely I've only just kind of got my energy back from all of that, really.
Yeah, it's a mammoth thing to do, isn't it? Especially when you're collaborating with somebody on producing something. It's it's definitely, you require energy for that, don't you? Separately to if you're just working solo on something and you can fit in around things. Did you find that the process of collaboration was something that suited your style, your writing process, the way that you work? Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I think fundamentally I enjoyed it. Definitely, RJ is a pleasure to deal with. He's an absolute pro, so that's really helpful. He didn't like take my money and leave the country or anything like that. So that was good. That the audiobook narrators definitely shouldn't do that. Just to be put that out there. So if only that gets a tiny bit of just make sure you edit that right. Otherwise, we're going to get into trouble here. So where am I going with this point? I think as a writer, again, it's solitary. But I think actually the more I've got into what's involved, I think that the opportunities of the collaboration, the things you should always seize, whether that's, we were talking again before this started, for example, organising Spotlight Indie for 2025, for example. It's really good to have those opportunities to get together and work collaboratively with other writers and other creative people, isn't it? There's you get something extra out of the experience. I worked with Holly Tinsley's project where she produced the Anatomy of Fear anthology, the fantasy horror anthology that came out in 2023. That was a Kickstarter experience. And that showed me the ropes of what to do for my own, actually. But yeah, that was a good experience to work together with people, edit other people's work, beta read other people's work. There's an awful lot of there's actually an awful lot of opportunities for collaboration in the sort of the writing space. And in a way, audio is very similar to that. So you've got it's not like, I suppose, with beta reading and editing and things like that, you're changing the material, whereas with an audiobook experience, it's more about you're looking for a creative person who can interpret your material and then also, I suppose, convey emotion that they can. So obviously, if I read it, it would just be dreadful because it's all about it's the skill of the interpret, it's the intonation, it's being able to, I suppose, effectively perform the book. That's what you're actually asking someone to be able to do. And so you kind of then you have a lot of to and fro about how to perform it. And in my case as well, one of the biggest logistical challenges was the character list. And I've got the book here, and it's something like your character list sort of kicks off and you've got about 150 odd people mentioned, which is, this includes gods and some historical figures and things. It's not crazy, but even whittling that 150 list down to who is actually really a character rather than window dressing, that was 30 to 35 individual voices that needed to actually be crafted and sorted out. So when I talk about the peaks and the troughs, a peak would have been who are the characters. RJ wants a pen portrait of all of them. Well, normally you might have 6 or 8 or something like that. Wouldn't be too difficult. I had, that took quite a long time to sort of just put that down and sort of, get that expressed. And then I thought RJ would say, okay, well, we'll make them all, because it's a northern setting. It's kind of like got that tone of, Game of Thrones, the North, the Wall. Though that kind of vibe is very much what I was going for in terms of the setting where it happened. So I thought everyone would be Yorkshire, but RJ quite reasonably pointed out that he can't do that many Yorkshire accents, even though he's from Yorkshire. So even then, it's still a challenge. So that was interesting. We actually had to go and start to think, okay, so what accents could you use in that wider setting, and then how could you make them make sense? So, for example, if two people come from the same town, it makes no sense for one to have a Cockney accent and one to be from Scotland, but both be the two brothers, for example. That you've got to stop to think about. It can't just be completely random. So we ended up actually sort of geographically overlaying accents that we could use with the region to give. So if that person's from that region, they would have that kind of source accent, and then RJ would take that and produce, I don't know, one of three West Country accents, for example, and that just gave the whole thing tons more realism and depth. Basically, it just kind of really changed what I envisaged it to be on the page, and then how he interpreted it and created it and turned it into this really big cast where he's the only narrator. That was really extraordinary from a creative point of view. That was really interesting and fun to do and see how he did it. Really,
that's really cool. I think being born and bred a Yorkshireman myself, I had never thought about how many ways there are to say "e by gum," but there aren't that many. There aren't that many. Not if it sound proper. Like, I think, that's a really interesting point, though, Tim, about like the regions and the dialects. And what it sounds like to me is it sounds like you had a great deal of collaborative effort that went into the creation of it. But obviously, when you're getting the audio files back, you're not the creator of those audio files, you're the audience. Yes, so what was it like, sort of like receiving your own words back, but being the audience for it when you were listening back to it?
Yeah, because I think when you're sort of doing the plotting of the actual characters and getting the starting point right, you get a few samples and things like that, so it's bits. So you kind of get an idea of tonally they might sound like this, but you don't get the whole package. Well, obviously, when you get the raw files delivered to you, it's totally different because that's the whole book. And then there is no other way to do it but to listen to every single word you've written. And that was actually the bit I was worried about the most. Because obviously all writers are familiar with imposter syndrome and those kind of things. I was thinking when I have been writing solidly for years, this book, this is coming out, the audio is coming out in 2025, but that book was written in 2020. And I thought, well, is it going to actually be as good as all the other things I've written since? So I was actually quite nervous listening to it, if I'm perfectly honest with you, because it was sort of, and what happened actually was, I thought, as I started to listen to it, it was almost like I'd not written the book, if that makes any sense at all. So it was, RJ was narrating it in a range of different voices, and even getting down to like the main character's age changes. So he's a boy, he's a teenager, he's a man, and he's also the narrator, which needs a slightly different intonation to when he's speaking. Otherwise, you can't tell when he's speaking and when he's narrating. Just to add sort of. So you had all of that going on, and I was astonished at how immersive it was, and rather than me thinking, oh, I really wish that book was better, I actually came out of the experience thinking that is the best interpretation. That's my favorite interpretation of the book, and there's only like written word and audio, I suppose, but it for me it actually made it. I just think it's the best. I just think it's one of the best things I've ever created. Collaborative with somebody else. I really do. It just has so much more depth. So rather than thinking, oh dear, it's the worst of my books, but at least it's out the way now, I actually kind of fell back in love with my debut. So rather than it kind of being a case of giving that work out there and producing a commodity, it actually kind of almost like relighted my fire for why I put that first book out in the first place. So it was really stressful and really busy, but it's also been really, really positive as an experience. Absolutely. And I'm thrilled. I'm absolutely thrilled with the results I've got out of it from that point of view. It's yeah, as you can tell, I'm quite pleased.
Yeah, and rightly so, deservedly so, and for anybody who's tuned in who, was tuning in last time and who backed the Kickstarter and who is now listening to the audiobook, I'm sure that they've gone through the same experience. You and Tim, you'll have been through the same thing where it kind of like refires that love of the story, right? Because that's the thing with audiobooks and print books, is that they are so different from one another, even though they're technically the same.
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
it's a strange thing, isn't it?
yeah. And I mean, and for some people, it's their only way to get that literary experience. Now, obviously, people who are visually impaired, audiobooks are essential, but also people who are just busy. Just getting out and about and doing things like that. So, I should just say I'm really, really grateful to my Kickstarter supporters that came in at the beginning, at the end, and in the middle. In fact, everybody, everyone played a part in making that, making that project happen. And RJ Bailey he was almost my first choice for the project. Because I knew he, for quite a lot of it, he's from, I suppose, the area that effectively kind of helped inspire the story. So actually, he was able to use his natural voice for quite a lot of the recording. But I also knew, because I'd worked on him with Anatomy of Fear, and we'd basically done the proofing of the audio, 12 different stories already, with lots of breadth in those. I knew he could do the range of a really big cast. And I know he found it difficult, because he said, "Tim, I found that really difficult." And I think fair enough. But I also knew he could do an absolutely good job. So I could have gone another route. You could have gone. You can get narrators for free doing royalty split, things like that. There are different ways to make an audiobook happen. But I think for the type of project I had, I really did need to get somebody in with that professional level of experience, because I think it would have been too big a project for a newbie or somebody looking to cut their teeth and make their name with something like this. I just think they would have struggled with the material, really.
Yeah,
Thank you,
definitely.
Kickstarter supporters. You're awesome and ace, and you've made Tim Hardie very happy.
Yeah, that's great to hear. In terms of like the other thing that can be very different between audiobooks and print. So obviously in print, you have kind of like an atmosphere depending on whether you're reading it as an ebook or whether you're reading it as a paperback or a hardback. The format kind of creates an atmosphere as to your reading experience, and there's a similar kind of phenomenon that happens with audiobooks, isn't there? Because you can do so much to set a vibe and set an atmosphere. How did you and RJ go about that, as to what kind of atmosphere you wanted to create, between scenes and, from chapter to chapter? What was that process like?
Yeah, so we don't have any kind of musical interludes or sound effects. We've not gone to the next level of audio. I suppose full audio drama is kind of what you're getting into there. So it's not so much what's in the recording; it's more about his interpretation of the characters. So, in fact, I'm doing this at the moment on social media. We did create a playlist, and although so I don't write to music, I find that incredibly distracting. I write in complete silence when I'm doing it, because it's all going on up here. But for RJ in particular, I want to try and get across some of the themes and the feel of the story. And I also use music. Some of that was from TV shows. Some of that was older music that just kind of gave me a vibe, I suppose, to say it's a bit like this. It's also a bit like this, but it's also a bit like that. Actually, I sort of created a basic, chose about 12 tracks and sort of put that together onto like a Spotify playlist. And it kind of ranges from Clannad, Robin of Sherwood, Enya, that kind of Celtic folk vibe, I suppose, really right through to hard rock and electronica and everything everything in between, really, because it kind of is a book of all those things. It's a book of mystery and I suppose intrigue, and the magic is deliberately a soft and mysterious kind of force, especially in the first book, because no one has a clue how it works. But then there's also like a very hard edge to it in terms of the fighting, but also the betrayals that go on and things like that. So it was trying to get him into the mindset of at this point in the book, this is the kind of mood and tone. Whether he found that useful or not, I'm not entirely sure, but I found it quite useful, just in terms of getting my head back into what was the story about, because I'd not read it avidly for 4 years. I was moving through the series, so it was a weird experience. I was kind of finishing the fourth book and completing the series, And at the same time, I was going back to the first book and sort of reliving it afresh. And then, that sort of playlist kind of came out really. So those sort of things help, I think, just get RJ into that mindset of how do I approach this character. What are the broad story beats that we're going to go through here, really? But to be honest, he'd let the characters do a lot of the talking as well. So a lot of it was simply just letting them be distinctive, and just sort of in those interactions and things are kind of, and I think they kind of set their own tone and mood a bit as well, really.
Yeah, because I feel like every new chapter, like when you're reading, you're carrying over something from the previous chapter into the new one, because you're just turning the page all the time. But like with audio drama, I find that it's a kind of like a different experience for me. It's like every time that I start a new chapter of an audio drama, it's kind of like going back to like square one. And the audio dramatists who put together the narrators and the actors that do the voices for it, they have this very bizarre way of suddenly within a few words capturing an atmosphere. And so that's what that was I think the thing for my question, because it blows my mind they can do that, like a sentence and all of a sudden you are somewhere else. Like how does that work? Like
I don't know.
Yeah, it blows my mind. It blows my mind.
It's very skillful, isn't it? I think people that can do that kind of thing. Like I said, if I was reading it out, you wouldn't get that same experience as if someone was performing. I think it's the difference between narration and performance, basically, isn't it? And that skill.
I also would love to see like a mix of like the Enya Clannad music and like hard rock. I think that would be. I think
in the same song,
yeah. No matter where you go, I will find you. That would be. I would listen to that 100%.
Yeah, I wouldn't, but I wish I didn't have to do this then. But thank you. It's a great idea. Not every idea flies, does it? Some just die the moment they.
I have a very low strike rate, but I have a lot of ideas. So
I wonder why.
You're welcome, Tim. You're welcome.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut your legs out from under you there, but sometimes you got to say no.
In terms of the fact that the audiobook as well is, you've got your big with Audible, this company that everybody associates with audiobooks, but there's also all of these other different sort of places you can get them now. Where can people find Hall of Bones? Where will they, if they were listening to this and thinking, oh yeah, I do actually, I'm really into the Enya hard rock vibe. I'm gonna go buy the book. Where would they find the audiobook?
Pretty much everywhere. Ironically, everywhere except Amazon at the moment, because as we record, they're the ones that are still going through their quality control. So it will be on Amazon Audible, very soon. As we're having this conversation, but we deliberately went wide with distribution rather than tying ourselves to Audible. So on this one, so you'll find it on Kobo, Barnes and Noble, Spotify is where I've listened to the testing, the test files, the teaser files and things like that. Pretty much everywhere. I've stuck it on one of my social media posts actually, because I can't remember the list. It's that long. It's about it must be about 20 different retailers. So I'm pretty sure if it normally sells audiobooks, or you can listen to it in some format through a streaming or subscribing service, it will be there basically.
Yeah, that's cool. Did it surprise you when you were looking into it as to how many different outlets for audiobooks there are these days?
Yeah, I mean, it's not all that different. I suppose book retailers. It's there's actually more than you think. Once you consider sort of like Barnes and Noble, Kobo, Amazon obviously sort of like spring to mind straight away. But there are a plethora of other competitors. Audio's more platforms to sort of consume and enjoy. So it's I'm quite glad. Actually, I outsourced distribution. I'm quite glad I did so now, having seen how complicated it is. But they've done a good job getting it out there actually.
That's great, and top marks for also seamlessly using the word plethora. That to me is that's a win. Like in any conversation when that word comes out, I'm just like Perfect.
If I'd known, I'd have used it earlier, Frasier. We'll have to remember. We'll discuss a plethora of. I can't even say it now. You actually made me stumble over the word I used thoughtlessly before. A plethora of topics for conversation next time round.
Yeah, we should just. That's what we should do. We should write. Your next book should be called Plethora. That's what it should be.
Yeah.
What is your next book going to be, Tim? Because you've been working on drafting recently, haven't you?
Yeah. So I had a bit of I suppose an enforced break really because of so I finished writing and I released Broken Brotherhood, so that the Brotherhood of the Eagle series is done, and that was released finally in November 24, and then effectively I moved straight into audiobook production. So actually I hadn't really started writing until this month, sort of about a week or two ago. But I'm picking up one old project, and I'm also starting a project I've had in my mind for a while, but I've actually started writing the first early chapters of that. So I'm writing a short story sequence, which at some point morphed into a novel. So I was basically, with my newsletter, if you're a newsletter subscriber, I give people access to a short story series called The Wolf Throne. And originally, I started off thinking this will be a soap opera of completely disposable individual stories you can almost read in any order. But what I started to realize as I would continue with the same characters, with the same setting and the same similar situations, was if you wrote it like that, you had to basically recap everything for every single short story every time, and that was actually quite grating for the reader. So it quite rapid, I think, because I'm used to writing in a novel format. Once I wrote that first short story in the Wolf Throne setting with Ingoy, it just grew in the telling. That one just took off. Lots of other ones have been short stories that have simply been created and they've stayed short, but this one clearly was actually a novel just fighting to get out of the sack, basically the creative sack. Yeah, there we go. That's a weird, horrible way to describe my creative process. So keep it professional. Bring it back. So yeah, but the basic, I ran out of bandwidth with the audio, with the Kickstarter, with the audio, with getting Broken Brotherhood edited and stuff like that. I just couldn't sustain writing the Brotherhood of the writing the Wolf Throne as well. So I got 8 stories in, which you can still get as a package on my newsletter. But I'm very conscious about, for about 9 months, I haven't produced any new content in relation to that. So that it was actually last weekend I started writing the next short story number 9, and I can actually also see the end in sight for getting that from short story individual episodes through to actually releasing that as a full novel. And I think if I concentrate and don't get distracted, and what could possibly go wrong, I'm hoping that the Wolf Throne will be out as a book for sort of general retail in 2026. Yeah. So that's project number 1, and I'm going to interpose that with other things. And then I'm also started writing. I've shifted over into a gaslamp horror fantasy setting. So I'm represented by John Jarrell Literary Agency. So that does obviously give me the route into looking at trad publication. I've always said I'd be happy to, I'm very happy with doing indie, but I do also think hybrid is in many ways the way, because you're maximising your reach, your markets, and the two to a certain extent are distinct. So I'm starting to work on a book called The Silent Division, which is basically the world told as the world that I used for the Anatomy of Fear short story from a couple of years ago. I'm taking that world, and then I'm just basically taking that setting and turning that into a novel story. So the Anatomy of Fear story is still a standalone tale, but I'm taking the premise of that and then going further in terms of time, but also going back in terms of filling in some of the blanks of how they got to that situation as well. So yeah, I've only written about 3 chapters of that, and I've sent it off to my agent. In fact, I emailed him over the weekend and said, do you think this is any good? So if he comes back and says, no, Tim, this is terrible, we're going to have to cut this bit out of the show. If that's rather hoping he's going to say, you probably are onto something here, because I'm having tremendous fun writing it, because it's a totally different style to Brotherhood, or frankly anything else I've actually written so far. To the extent I even needed to change the font I was using to write it in, because I needed to get my head into 1800s and not middle-age Viking fantasy. And for some reason, changing the font to something a little bit more flowy and there's a word that I need to use this, but I don't think it. Flowy and squiggly font was my go-to for this, and it
I like.
weirdly really helped root me into that mindset of the type of story I was trying to tell. And it looks gorgeous. It's just the Cambria font. It's nothing too fancy. But it looks gorgeous on the screen, and it's really helping to focus. Especially because I'm doing little epigraphs at the beginning of the chapters, which I'm putting into italics, and they look particularly nice. And so I think, just something that's easy on the eye from a writing point of view. It does actually really help settle you into that thing. So I've kind of done a project. I'm straight then into two, trying to do two simultaneously is the plan.
That's cool. I haven't thought about the idea as to the difference that a font could make to your writing process,
Neither
but
had I.
that's actually a really cool thing. Like if you struggle to write different characters, just change the fonts, see what happens. That's a really good tip.
Quite a few writers popped out the woodwork when I mentioned that, actually, and sort of said, I do this, that, and the other, for exactly that reason, to get mindset or distance, or just keep two projects distinct. So I'm not sure I mentioned the title of that one, just in case John Jarrell hates it, but I'm confident that it's going to be called The Silent Division. And going to be working on that. I'm hoping to get that finished this year and then basically out to submission early in 2026. So basically I'll twin track a bit of trad submission with going alongside with hopefully indie with the Wolf Throne.
It's always busy, Tim. Always, it's busy. Yeah. I wanted to ask you as well, because I know that obviously you were saying back in November, Brotherhood of the Eagle, that series finished. That series has been with you for such a long time, and now it's done. How does that feel?
I think. How does that feel? Well, it's a bit like I suppose what we mentioned before about what it feels like to end a project with the kind of the high, the mental exhaustion, and then the sort of almost relief. It's kind of over, and then that sense of satisfaction. It is all of those feelings. It was more bittersweet than I expected it to be, because it's not. I mean, I produced All of Bones in 2020, but actually I wrote it. First knocking to the idea of that story came about in 2011. So that's really been a 13-year. Is that the right maths? Yeah, 13-year writing project to get from book 1 to book 4. I think the weirdest thing about it was you were right. I was writing scenes I'd envisaged for many years, so I was getting them on the page, and that was amazing. And then I was also ending the storylines of every character, and we're probably around 200 fates of people needed to be determined. Whether that's again just somebody who's got a placeholder name because I didn't want to say the word the warrior 8 million times. You just need a little bit of variety in that, but you still want to know what happened to said warrior. Well, I don't know. Is that just a me thing? If I read a book and I'm not entirely sure about the fate of every character I've been invested in from page 1 to 500, I get really annoyed by that. That's probably just me as a bit of a I don't know, maybe I'm a bit compulsive, a bit obsessive like that. But because of that, I had to I really had to end the book in book 3 in terms of knowing what I was doing to have a shot in hell of actually closing it out in book 4. And that's really what I realized about book 2. It was never going to be 3. It was already impossible to land that aeroplane from that height. So I had to sort of start doing those step downs in book 3 to get into a position where then, if certain events played out, that would then resolve all those things. That's really quite a long answer. I think the result of that, though, is every single person's storyline's ending. And so, in a way, whether they, live a quiet life and nothing much has ever happened to them, there weren't many of those, whether it was, they died horribly maimed and really regretted their life choices, or, that they made it out in glory and all the rest of it. It didn't really matter because I wasn't going to write them ever again. And that only really kind of struck me once I finally finished working on the book and finally finished working on all the hassle of formatting and all those lovely things that go on with releasing an indie book that no one thinks about. But once all those procedural steps and admin steps and things were done, it suddenly kind of dawned on me, I'm not writing any of these characters ever again. At least not in the immediate future. I'm not ruling out there might not be a return at some point. But, in terms of the main story, it was over. And so it was a bit like a death for all of them, is the only way I can really describe it. Because you put your pen down on them. And so, rather than sort of like inhabiting your head for 13 years, sort of like, thinking about storylines that can involve them, how they feel, the fact they come up and you say, what happens in the story, don't you? What? And because the characters are obviously alive, as we all know. I thought, they're all gone, and it was quite weird actually. I'm not going to lie. It kind of, but at the same time, that sounds like a really negative thing. I was an absolute high. I wasn't a high one to stop crying. It was good to get to that point, but by the same token, it's also very freeing as well. So I think one of the reasons why I've changed my font, because I'm crazy like that, is because I've got a new project, and so it's it gives you sort of like something to sort of to work with that's completely new, and that gives you certain energy. And a bit like the Ball Throne, I suppose, is writing. It's an adjacent story, so it's not totally some of those areas and some of the historical figures getting referenced, that sort of stuff. But it felt very freeing to be able to go back to that without the weight of a huge 4-book multifaceted novel to try and close out competently, really. I think positive. It took me, probably took me a couple of months to really properly get over and feel creative again in terms of writing, rather than doing some of the other stuff I've been describing earlier on.
That's really good to know. I guess for anybody who's listening to this who is mid sort of series and are planning to have an end to the series, it's good to get some recuperation time afterwards, isn't it?
I think I'm focusing at the moment very much. The Wall of Thrones is a standalone story. The Silent Division I'm writing it as a standalone tale, but I'm leaving it's open. It could have a sequel, that sort of thing. But I think at the moment I kind of want to spread a bit wider with what I'm writing, and then sort of work in that sort of maybe again the right project will feel like a series at the right time. Whereas the Brotherhood of the Eagle always felt like a series. It was never going to just be one book. It was always, it was always going to run through from start to finish like that. And I think even if I go back to, so Quiet Vengeance is my standalone novel at the moment. I've got this sort of idea of a sequential set of standalones, a bit like Joe Abercrombie's post First Law trilogy when he wrote those three. Those next 3 books, I'm kind of doing a bit of a similar thing with the Samarak Tales. So again, likely I'll go back to that'll probably be my 3rd project to go into after those other 2. That'd be another standalone project at that point in development. And I think that I wonder if that might be better for me now. I'm a bit more experienced in what I'm doing, that actually concentrate on telling a story, tell a tale in one place, but then know you can expand it if you need to. I think perhaps is a better way to sort of keep your energy levels high, because I was getting quite tired writing Brotherhood towards the end. That was quite that was sort of probably took me about on and off with the Kickstarter getting Broken Brotherhood book 4 done. It started in 2023 beginning of, and finished sort of effectively tail end 2024. So even that was 2 years of solid effort trying to get that one over the line, really.
Yeah. One of the things I'm curious about, because obviously you've learned so much as a writer, writing these books, writing the Brotherhood of the Eagle. But one of the things that really intrigued me was the idea of the lessons that you've learned from the audio drama and the confidence that you seem to have drawn from listening back to it. Has an impact, or have you taken things from that you're then applying to the drafting that you're doing now?
Yeah, it's a good question, that, isn't it? I think a little bit of imposter syndrome is a good thing, but I think most writers are overburdened with far too much of it, and not everyone's writing is to everyone's taste. But I think if you're doing it sort of as long as we're doing it and kind of getting the reviews we're getting, that sort of thing, you've got to start thinking, I probably am quite competent at this, I'm doing all right. And so I thought, if that's my debut and that's what it actually is, it did fire me. Actually, it made me feel, what, the only person that's holding you back when you're doing your writing is you. Ultimately, the only person that thinks, I'm not able to come up with anything good, or I don't think these characters work. Well, if you think that way, it's gonna be harder to write. So it kind of, you are talking to me as I'm sort of like probably at an energy level where I'm quite hyper at the moment, as you can probably tell. But I think that does come a little bit from confidence of getting 5 books done, of getting I suppose I'm not saying that it's the worst book I've ever written, Hall of Bones, but I think it was the book with your debut. You're always learning, I think, is how I'm going to put that. But to see that interpreted, so that's how that raw materials can be used and interpreted, and that's kind of what's going to go on in somebody's head when they either hear it or they read it. Think, actually, yeah, that's all right. I can do more of this. I want to do more of this, and you've got to kind of get yourself into the mindset of, yeah, just go for what you want to do. So I think for me, kind of like getting the series completed, I think it was tiring, but at the same time, it was a bit of a confidence booster to say, yes, all right, you've done that now. You can do it. People like it, but you need to go on. You need to broaden your palette. You need to try some new things, and and see what happens. I've always found every time you do a project, it's really bizarre, but some really random connections and things just happen out of that, which they obviously don't do if you don't do a project. So yeah, I don't know. I can't remember what the question was. I can't remember what my answer was, but I'm hyped and I'm ready to go. Basically,
I love it. I think we're all hyped and ready to go.
This is water, nothing more. So
no, I feel like there's we are constantly walking that tightrope between sort of like belief and sort of what's the word?
Yeah, I can think of rude words, but I know the
one. Yeah. Like
I think
let's say doubt, right? But yeah, we are kind of on a tightrope between doubt and belief, aren't we? Where it's like you've got to believe that you are able to do this, while at the same time not allowing that belief to rob you of the positives that come from wanting to push yourself and wanting to think, oh, is this good enough? I feel like that's what it's like to be a writer, right? It's like it's having your brain, one side of your brain in one camp and the other in the other, isn't it?
Yeah, I think I described it once as like the bit like the brakes on your car. If you're trying to write with your handbrake on, you're not going to get very far down the road. And I think for a lot of people, the imposter syndrome is so strong. They never create, they never share what they create. They never finish because it's never good enough. They're trying to perfect in a bubble where I think you absolutely need that critical input. I think my writing group has been so important to me because that they kind of mirror that to a certain extent. They will tell you if something's no good, but they won't tell you in such a way that they put the handbrake back on. And I think you need, as a writer, you need to have a really balanced approach to what you're doing. You have to have the insane self-belief that if you start writing a novel, you'll finish it. That's not straightforward. But then you also have to have enough understanding that what you're writing probably won't be perfect. But it won't be but it will for everyone. But it won't be perfect for some people. It'll be perfect for others, which is a problem in itself. And then you've got to be able to take feedback in a way that doesn't destroy your inner soul and make you believe that you actually should never have been a writer in the first place. But then you've also got to have the self-belief to say, well, okay, person A said this, person B said that. Actually, I'm going to go with person C, or you're all wrong. But then everybody, you probably haven't. Again, you probably got it wrong. It's a really weird mix of confidence, being humble, listening, but then also really trusting your gut and knowing what you want to do with that story. Because and ultimately, that I think that gut instinct has to be the overriding factor that you need. Why a scene's there, why a character's there, what you're trying to do with it. So yeah, again, I don't think it's a solitary profession. I think if you want to do this at a high level, you've got to start letting people in to critique your work, and you've then got to find a really healthy mindset to deal with what comes back afterwards as well. But for me, my writing group, they've definitely pushed me up another level, partly because they also send me their stuff. I think, oh, they're really good, and I'm not as good as them. So then it spurs me to try and be better. But I think that's quite a healthy environment.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's finding your tribe is the way that you stay on that tightrope, because when you start to lose a bit of balance, they can see that and help bring you back. And I think it's a good it's very very useful. Yeah, doing it with people. In terms of how you found your tribe and how you find your writing group, was that just through the process of being involved in the community, or was it a specific group that you got into, or?
Yeah, it was just natural connections made through the community. So I know social media gets a bad press in some quarters, and it definitely has its pros and its cons. But again, I think if I'm looking back, I started creative writing in 2005, and I effectively wrote in a cave. I think I might have said this to you before on this podcast, Steve, but I wrote in a cave in total isolation until 2015. So 10 years where I was simply trying to figure it out all on my own. Looking back, that was crazy. That was absolutely crazy. But I thought I couldn't go onto social media as an author until I had written a book, which is also crazy. So don't do either of those things, guys. So it was only really when I got agented by John Jarrold, who took me on, that I had a sounding board, and my writing went up a level straight away just by having a sounding board of somebody, frankly, who's like one of the doyen in the fantasy community. He's seen it all, he's read it all. From that point of view, I couldn't have had a better mentor. But my writing then went, I think, up at that next level when I finally took the plunge and joined social media. And I think what that also helped to do was I ended up moving into a bit of a circle of people at a similar point in their writing career to me, and I think that's quite useful in some ways. Having John Jarrold as a mentor is great, but he's not a writer, so you need people that can bring those different blends of experience together. And it was really helpful to get into a writing group of everybody who they just released 1 or 2 books, they were just gearing up, and it helped us because we were all at a similar point. We were all able to, I think, lift each other up a little bit to keep going, and that all came through just natural connections on social media, primarily on Twitter, as was. I think now it's not perhaps quite so good a platform as it was for me in 2019 when I was sort of forming those initial relationships and those initial friendships. Some of those people I've known now for six odd years, and they've become properly good friends. So I think you absolutely have to put yourself out there. I mean, I think you can obviously apply to your local writing groups and things like that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I think in your local writing group, you're probably more likely to find people of a range of abilities. And you're probably also going to find people of a range of taste. So for me, it was I wanted people who wrote fantasy because I write fantasy, and I wanted people who frankly knew what they were doing as well. And so I think I kind of got into my writing group by invitation. I was invited in, if you like, but I think I was probably invited in because somebody had read my stuff. They thought he can write. Again, go trying to fight off imposter syndrome. So they said I think I really like what you did. Would you be interested in joining our writing group? I'm at a very similar point to you, and that person was Holly Tinsley. So I owe Holly Tinsley an awful lot because she just got me into that. I think rather than just a world of acquaintances, it was the first sort of forging of what became very meaningful friendships through that wider writing group that she was part of. She's responsible for a lot of things, Holly. When you sort of dig beneath the surface, lots of things are happening.
Yeah, Holly H.L. Tinsley is indeed a legend. As are you, Tim. As are you. No, I love Holly. Obviously, with the Spotlight Indie channel and all of that kind of stuff. How could you not love Holly? Like, she's awesome.
No, she does great stuff, and she puts she makes things happen. The Anatomy of Fear is one of the reasons now why I'm writing the Silent Division. That world wouldn't even exist without that kind of input and creative nudge and getting involved in things. So I think my advice is put it about a bit. Don't be shy. Not everyone is going to be your natural writing soulmate or natural mentor, but eventually, just by the sheer number of interactions, you will find them. I think particularly if you pick up a book and really enjoy it, tell the author, because especially if it vibes with you, there's a good chance you might have something more to talk about. And that's effectively what happened to me, really.
That's awesome. And on the topic, this is the most beautiful segue into an outro I've ever done. On the topic of social media, Tim, if people have enjoyed our chat tonight or today or whenever you're watching it, where can they find you?
I am very easy to find. So basically, you need to look for Tim Hardie author. That combination of words will bring up pretty much everything you need. So it's Hardie with an IE rather than a Y, just to make it a little bit more hard. But yeah, Tim Hardie author. And currently I'm on X as it is now. I'm on Facebook. I've got a couple of accounts on there, so follow me on either one. I'm on Instagram. I'm not quite sure why, but it's happened. So that's also going on. And I've also joined Blue Sky as well. So I'm kind of over a number of accounts. If all that was too hard to write down or remember, I've also got a website. So that's timhardieauthor.co.uk. We've got all my social links actually on there as well. So yeah, but I'm not difficult to find.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that with us, Tim, and thank you for joining me. And it's been so nice because with these kinds of chats and speaking to you over the Kickstarter, I was so excited to see how it was going to turn out, and it's been so lovely to hear about your experiences with the audiobook and putting
Yeah.
it
I mean,
together. It's been
if it
so
hadn't
great.
funded, it would have been, none of that would have happened. It's funny, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, it's a testament that if you want something to happen, do back a Kickstarter because you'll make somebody very happy.
Yeah, that's awesome. So thank you so much for joining me, and all of the best with your next steps with writing
Thanks,
these
Fraser. Yeah, it's been great.
projects.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
and
thanks so
we'll
much for having me on. I've enjoyed our chat. It's been good.
anytime, Tim. Yeah, and thank you for tuning in, and join us again when we'll be speaking to another author. But in the meantime, thanks, Tim. You take care.
Yeah, thanks. Cheers, Fraser.